Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
I mean, you're part of the, well, obviously you're a pension fund in your own right, but you're part of the institutional investor group on climate change, who also has a keen interest to support the NDCs in their new manifestation and their new ambition. But the International Investor Group on Climate Change also put out some very specific ideas about, you know, how governments could sort of lessen the gap, and perhaps how we as the investment community could be clearer to also help lessen the gap. It's not one side or the other. It would be great if you could share the highlights of that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here today. When it comes to reaching our fiduciary duty, we are increasingly taking countries' transition plans into consideration. We use the plans for asset allocation, risk management, and capital deployment strategies. However, in the current form, the NDCs significantly vary in quality and also in detail across countries, and often lack sufficient information about policy implementation. And there is today a disconnect between the commitments from countries and the concrete action plans. According to IEA, there is a gap, and the gap is currently insufficient to meet the 1.5-degree scenario that we all have agreed upon. So in the updated NDCs, countries have the chance to develop credible transition plans that will drive investments. And credibility is key in this sense, and we heard in the panel before about reputational risk, and I think reputational risk and credibility goes hand in hand. So yeah, I would like to bring up the Global Investor Statement on Climate Crisis that was published last week. 500 investors globally, representing more than $70 trillion US, came together to put out recommendations to countries when now going into the process of developing and further evaluate the NDCs that will be launched next year. And I will bring up a few points from that statement that will be discussed further here in New York tomorrow at the event that the series is hosting. First of all, produce more granular detail on sectoral pathways, which is important. We had an example from Gambia earlier here about agriculture sector. These kind of sectoral transition plan has to be developed, and also ensure that goals on a near term, 2030, 2035, are also in line with the 1.5 scenario. And mention what is expected from the private sector and how the private sector will contribute to the transition. These expectations will create business opportunities. Implement robust carbon pricing, rising over time with appropriate coverage, and also establish plans to and targets to phase out fossil fuel use. Transitioning away from fossil fuels is now a formal goal of public policy, and it's written into international law. So we believe it's important for a credible transition plan to actually address the phase out of fossil fuel use. And also mandate climate-related disclosure across the financial system. Transparency will produce more efficient markets. Require the public disclosure 1.5 pathway, aligned transition plans for listed and large non-listed companies, and also asset managers and asset owners. Mandatory climate risk disclosure, covering scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions data. And also as a last point, investors have noted the absence of human rights standards in many countries' transition plans. This absence means that policies indirectly encourage investors to and companies to bolster their renewable portfolios without taking in consideration social concerns. And this goes against the principle of a just transition. So an integrated approach for social and environmental justice. And ending with saying that the whole of a government approach is essential to unlocking the capital that is needed. And we are looking forward and are happy to collaborate with countries and governments on producing these new NDCs.
Wonderful. No, thank you very much. Pablo, I hope that was useful as an institutional investor perspective. I think it's very well documented. It's a statement that can be shared. So thank you, Fredric, for that.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.